from the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today I'm very pleased joining me Jon Gillham, who's from Originality.AI. Jon, the way I love to do it is I keep it to my guests to introduce themselves because I believe no one can introduce someone else better than themselves. So tell us a little bit about you and what you're currently up to.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me, Mehmet. So my background, mechanical engineer, worked in oil and gas industry, built up some online businesses, all focused around content marketing, where producing content, publishing on Google, getting traffic. And then that led to starting the agency, which then saw sort of the wave of generative AI coming. And we built, and we were struggling to answer the question when customers were asking us, was this AI created or human created, and how are you controlling for that? And that was when we decided to build Originality.AI, which predated ChatGPT. We launched on the Friday and ChatGPT came out on basically the Monday. So been a year and a half since, and been an interesting ride.
Indeed, it's an interesting ride because since ChatGPT was released, like I can say, it took the world by a storm, especially in the content space, Jon. So you mentioned like what were the main challenges for people to know, like they want to know if this content is generated by AI or is generated by, is it written by actual humans? So what do you think the real challenge behind the content that is generated by AI? Is it because of the authenticity? Is it because it's affecting some other areas? Why people are, interested to detect if the content is generated by AI or it's a human?
Yeah, no, it's kind of a key question. Good question. I mean, there's kind of two reasons to it. One reason is sort of there's a fairness component to that. If somebody's happy to pay a writer $100 or $1,000 for an article, they're not super happy when that article got copied and pasted out of ChatGPT in 5 minutes. So there's sort of that, that's part one, that's sort of the fairness piece. But then the second part is the way the world is viewing AI content is evolving. And there's risk associated with it. There's reputational risk associated with it if you publish factually inaccurate information. And then Google is facing an existential threat if their entire search, and as a result of that existential threat, are taking steps to fight AI spam. And so, it's fairly simple to think about, whereas if Google's search results are filled with nothing but AI generated content, then people wouldn't go to Google. They would just simply go to the AI that generated that result and get a far more personalized answer to whatever that searcher's query was. And so if the end result is that Google is totally overflown with AI generated content, I think it's really an existential threat for them, and they are fighting back strongly against AI spam. And so there's sort of those two pieces. There's the fairness component. Happy to pay $100, $1,000, whatever the other cost is, but don't want the writer to have just copied and pasted it out of ChatGPT. And then there's a second part where publishing AI content introduces risks that the publishers should be the ones that are making the decision on if they're going to accept those risks, reputational risk, Google risk, etc.
But Jon, and correct me if I might be wrong, but even before, so just for the audience to know, before even ChatGPT, there were some tools that were using ChatGPT API to generate the content. There are plenty of tools out there.
Yep.
But even before that era, I remember I used to receive these spam emails mentioning, hey, like I have a bunch of articles that if you just put them in your blog, you will get the SEO. And when I was still new to all this, I was reading this article and I found that they also junk. So is the AI just like amplified this problem, or is it like creating a completely a new, I would say, set of problem that even the previous issues they were creating before?
Yeah. So yeah, it's the pre-ChatGPT generative AI existed, right? I think there's a lot of people. I mean, I'm sure most of your audience in the show will be well aware that like OpenAI had APIs that you could tap into with GPT-3, and ChatGPT was sort of a very evolved wrapper on its GPT-3, its own GPT-3 API. And so yeah, this problem existed pre-ChatGPT. ChatGPT just exploded the problem, made it significantly larger. I think kind of there's a funny kind of graph that shows the like progression of AI relative to human intelligence, where it's like not that long ago, it's kind of like, hey, cute, the monkey can do, or the robot can do monkey tricks, and then now it's like, skyrocketed in terms of capabilities. And I think we sort of went through that phase at the tail end of sort of like what writing tools are capable of producing, because pre-ChatGPT and just slightly before that with some other tools like Jasper, the content that predated those really wasn't worthwhile. It's kind of similar to the stuff that you were getting in those like big bulk packages of like, hey, here's a bunch of content. It's like, it was just not good. And Google was really effective at identifying bad content and punishing it. What has changed is that this sort of auto-generated, what Google views as spam content, reads really well, is really well written, good content that is harder to tell the difference between now sort of spam generated content that is grammatically well written compared to what predated this problem.
Absolutely. And there's another aspect, John, here, which is some people, they say, okay, like part of the problem is not only Google, like Google and other search engines who hardened their search engine optimization in a way that forced people to, style their writing in a way and, focusing on the keywords and this. So some people actually, they blame the search engine companies, and mainly Google, of course, and a little bit Bing or Microsoft, for having created this. And now they're saying, okay, like ChatGPT is not only for, writing blogs. You can do with it multiple things. So they said, okay, why we don't leverage it to just like make Google happy? So they are actually blaming the search engine companies that it's your fault that you forced us to do this. Do you agree with that?
I think there's certainly, it's a hard problem to solve. There's such an economic incentive to be able to win on Google that people will always try and manipulate it. And so I think there's certainly, Google will always do things that are not what they do and what they say will not always be 100% aligned. And what they are trying to do and versus what they say they're doing is also not always aligned. So I do think Google will constantly be turning the knobs on their algorithm, and then SEOs who are producing content will always be trying to optimize against that. And I think there will be times where the effects of that will be like, if you right now, or what has ranked for a long time when like call it the world of recipes, was like a 2,000 word story about their life before they got into the recipe. And that's not what people wanted. People wanted to get into the recipe. That's what they were there for. And so I think but that's not what Google was rewarding. And so people followed what Google was rewarding. And so I think, I don't think there was a malicious intent from Google to sort of incentivize behavior that they didn't want. But I think the result is that Google tries to deliver what people want and people will always try to optimize for what is currently working.
Fine. Now, Google themselves, they are into the AI game as well. So what is now Gemini used to be called Bard. So they have it. So, and I'm using Gemini sometimes because if I want something which is like recent, like I don't want to rely on the knowledge base in the large language model. So do you think that they can tackle this problem with Gemini? So maybe Gemini will become the interface of the Google search as we know it, because, you know, Perplexity, which is another startup, actually they are trying to do this. So are you seeing, you know, from search / AI perspective, we're going to go to see this mix? Because honestly, also one of my guests, some of my guests, I asked them, like, did your behavior change after ChatGPT? They said, yes, we go less to Google now and we go to ChatGPT. So how do you see that they are trying to tackle this, the AI? From
it's tough. I think incredibly hard situation for them. That I think they are well aware of that. They don't want to be a legacy. You know, they don't want to be the codec that let digital cameras sort of pass them by. So they need to be AI forward, which they are certainly attempting to be. But then they can't just totally crush their cash cow and legacy business around search and display ads. And so trying to balance that is probably going to be one of the sort of, you know, can they successfully navigate that will be a defining moment for them. So to answer the question, you know, what do I personally think will happen? I don't know. I think there's no scenario where AI, enriched AI search will not be the future. Do I think it will be sort of the SGE, like the summary at the top? I'm not sure. I think most people that are using that like to sort of blow past that and then get to the results. If they're in Google, they're trying to like find the best answer from a site. I think it will be some kind of hybrid. I think I can't imagine where it's not some kind of hybrid where it's AI summarized AI information that is customized to you, and then the source. You know, I think Perplexity is taking a really interesting approach that I appreciate and I think will be useful. And then I think, you know, ChatGPT could easily sort of integrate, not easily, but could also integrate in, you know, an increased number of links and sourcing, and maybe that becomes the way that people access the world's information.
Yeah, fine. I agree with you on this, Jon. Now, back to the detection part. So, personally, even I tried. I am a transparent person. People knows, you know, if they follow the show, I always share what I do. Now, sometimes it's very obvious to us, especially when you go to LinkedIn or other social media platform. Now, everyone knows if this piece of content was written by AI, mainly ChatGPT, because people after 1 year, I would say, or maybe 1 year and a couple of months now, they know how ChatGPT will write a piece of content to you, you know, from the styling, from the wording. But I've seen something interesting, which personally I tried. So basically, a couple of times, what I tried to do is to use, let's say, Gemini and ChatGPT. And I start to do this mix. And the final one, I look at it, you know, and it doesn't look like an AI written thing. So is this still something that you think that it's considered as a spam? Is it like, but when we think about it from a, you know, what the work that you do now to make, you know, sure that there's integrity and there is also like, you know, protection for the publishers, do you think this will make things harder to detect in the future?
I think there's a question that, you know, when GPT-10 comes out, will we still be effective at detecting it? Hard to bet against the progress of AI. The flip side of that is that every new model that has come out, our gap to detection capabilities has been smaller than the previous model. So our detector has been getting more effective at identifying AI than writers have been being created that become undetectable. Now, I think there's a couple reasons for that. The sort of foundational technology, transformers, the hardware that they're being trained on, the data sets that are being used, all share a lot of similarities in their training, and so the differences in their styles from Claude 3 to GPT-4 Turbo to Grok to Mixtral, to any of these models aren't too different from one another from a capability detection standpoint. And so the mixing example that you provided, where some is written in ChatGPT, some is written in Gemini. They share some common similarities that are able to be identified by detectors. And so, I think there will always be an adversarial component to trying to bypass detectors. And we have a red team that's constantly working on attempting to beat our own detector using strategies like mixing. And so that's the aim of what I guess that's how we're thinking with the problem of, how will the world evolve from a undetectability and these adversarial attempts?
Absolutely. Now, one thing also about the challenge of detection, OpenAI themselves, they had a tool to detect and they had to shut it down because they figured out that it's not accurate. And it's a hard thing. Now, one time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jon, because I want to a little bit dive, not into deep technical, but one time, what I understood that if OpenAI, Google, anyone, Anthropic, like all these companies that they have these models. So each time you ask for something to be written, so it has a token. And this token actually allows you to track it later to see if it was, generated by this model or not. But as long as, and because there's privacy part in it, so it makes hard for these companies to let everyone, know that this is generated by AI or not. Do you agree with me that also the privacy part of, these companies, that they cannot disclose with the rest of the world, like who did what on our platform, make the situation of detection more hard? And why do you think even themselves, they fail to do that, to even detect that it's written by AI or not?
Yeah, so their model, they were in a really tricky spot because they're viewed as the authority on if they have a detector and that detector says that something was AI, it's really, really challenging for somebody to say that, no, that was a false positive because this is actually the company that produced the content. And so detectors are classifiers, and sort of like to name them correctly, are able to provide a probability on whether or not a piece of content was AI generated or human generated. Similar to kind of a weather prediction, it's AI that will sometimes get it right, sometimes get it wrong, most of the time get it right, sometimes get it wrong. And you have to tune it so whether you're sort of focusing on detection or focusing on sort of catching the AI or focusing on making sure you call human content. And so you're always need to sort of like tune between those two settings. In OpenAI's case, because they get viewed as they're the authority, of how could they get it wrong? They're the ones that actually created the content. Their classifier was very, very, very heavily tuned to providing as low a false positive count as possible. But they still couldn't get it to zero because nobody can with a classifier get it to perform absolutely perfectly across a giant unseen data set. And they had it so tuned to reducing false positives, but still couldn't get to zero, that their accuracy rate was crap. And so they had some logical constraints based on being viewed as the authority to set up their detector and their classifier in the way that they did, which is why they had to shut it down, because it was still produced false positives and was pretty useless at detecting AI content. So that was their situation. And then in terms of, so the second part of the question was on, sorry. What was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question was about how the problem can be solved actually. The challenge of actually really detecting this because of the privacy part as well. That's what I was asking.
Yeah, the privacy part. So I think watermarks were sort of held up as the sort of initial hope around like there's significant societal consequences to when you're no longer able to tell the difference between what's human and what's AI. Mass propaganda, significant spam. And so the hope was that watermarking, that every LLM would be able to produce a cryptographic communication around what has what they've created and what other LLMs have created. I think that was possible when in sort of a monopolistic world where all content was being created by ChatGPT. In a world where we have open source models, and there will be simple adversarial strategies to remove watermarking, I think it's become pretty clear that sort of absolute provability that this content was created by an LLM through the use of watermarking will not be an effective means of detection and solving sort of the societal problems with the not being able to tell the difference between human and AI content.
So this reminds me too much of the cat and mouse game that we talk about, in for example, cybersecurity, where you have the hackers and then you have the defenses, and then people will try to remove. Like same thing applies even to the deep fake. Now it applies to the voice as well. Yep. Now, one part which very interesting is that I know, Jon, you and your team, you have done some studies about the reviews, on different platforms like Amazon reviews, like different other platforms like software review platforms. Tell me about what actually these reviews reveal to you, and what are like something that you think it's really we should stop and think about it.
No, the reviews have been an interesting one. So I mean, we sort of had the hypothesis that since the ability of ChatGPT, how many reviews were AI generated or not, and so we went and scraped a bunch of reviews across a bunch of different platforms, and then ran them through a detector to look at the sort of percent of reviews that were AI generated. Kind of all of our studies start off with sort of like a 2.5% probability of the reviews being AI generated. That sort of falls in line with our false positive rate of what our model detects. And then what we've seen is that we've seen some sites get up to as high as 30% of their reviews are AI generated, and these are some popular go-to review sites. And it really raises a question that we all need to continue to think about in terms of like, where do we want AI content and where do we not want it? And I think personally, I want, if I'm reading a review, I want to know that review came from a human. And I don't want to have to feel like I'm doing a Turing test every time I read a review and trying to tell, am I interacting with the machine or interacting with the human? And so, it's been interesting and sort of continuation of the question without a obvious answer. I think it's one of those things that society is going to have to continue to wrestle with on how it on where it's sort of ethically, morally, potentially ending up being legally allowed to use AI generated content, and where does it need to actually be that human's voice, or does it move to a world where we put a lot more you talked about privacy, where sort of anonymity will be reduced because you want to have trust that the person that wrote this, you can connect back to them and they're standing behind those words. So no, it's raised an interesting question on how we want as society to handle AI versus human content. And I think reviews is this place where I would rather read a review from a human.
Yeah, and I know that, Jon, you have an opinion about like how, of course, in maybe a metaphorical way, AI is actually unintentionally doing harm to people. And maybe you share with me the story about the foraging books.
Yes.
Right, and how do you believe, after you tell us this, how we can address this from ethical consideration?
Yeah, no, we worked with the New York Times, then worked with Guardian to look at some books that were on Amazon. One of the books that we were identified as being AI generated, it was a book on foraging for mushrooms. And as you know, LLMs are prone to do, whoever had been using that LLM had not proofread the book clearly well enough, and it had suggested that to determine if a mushroom was safe to taste it. Which could obviously lead to death, and incredible, harm to that individual. And so that was sort of one of those times where it's like, it can often feel a little bit theoretical when we're talking about the harm that AI can produce. And just to be clear, like I use AI all the time. I think it's awesome. I think there's just we need to sort of understand when it's being used and when it's not being used. And so to answer the second part, what do I think the world's going to look like, and how are we going to sort of ethically handle when we don't know if content has been AI generated or human generated? I think it's going to come down to a lot more responsibility being put on the person putting their name behind the content. If you host a podcast with an AI trained voice, if you put your name behind that, in the end, it might not matter as long as sort of you're not trading your trust with your audience. If it's great and entertaining and useful and educational, that could be great. But I think the world is going to come down to the author behind pieces of content having a lot more responsibility when they hit publish.
Absolutely. And the last thing I would think about is to replace myself with an AI avatar. I would not do this. I would prefer, even if I do mistakes, even if I have some technical difficulties, I would prefer to still do this way.
Yep.
Now, John, tell me a little bit, because I know you've built something really special, and you're trying to differentiate yourself by some of the technologies and some of the methodologies that you are using. So if you can little bit shed some light, on what make originality different than, maybe the other tools out there, and, why you think it really can make some impact on getting back to what we were talking first, stop people getting caught by AI, and of course, maybe help also in detecting when it's appropriate not to use AI.
Yeah, no, we've got so I think the first thing that we do that is a little bit different is that we're built exclusively for copy editors. So people that are writing content, that are publishing the content on the web. We don't like our tool being used within academia. We're not trained on academic data sets. We're trained on sort of web publishing data sets. So that's who we're building for. And then as a result of that, we have some unique features that other detectors don't have. One, our efficacy level, our accuracy rate, our true positive rate is higher than other tools. And we go to some pretty extreme steps to provide transparency, including all of our data sets that we use to sort of back up our claims around efficacy, both data sets that we've created and then a bunch of data sets that we'll source from other locations and then publish all of that research. So that's kind of the big thing around efficacy. And we've added some features that are unique. So we will false positives do happen. They suck. But we provided a Chrome extension that allows people to visualize the creation process of a Google document. And that really helps. If a false positive does happen, allows writers to show their work and show their creation process to be able to say, no, this was a false positive. It does happen, 2.5% of the time. And gives them the ability to sort of communicate that. And then last sort of feature that we've released is a fact-checking tool. Whether or not people are happy to publish AI generated content, there's logical reasons not to. I think no one says I want to publish factually inaccurate information. And so that was another feature that we added. It's still in beta. It's not as good as we want it, better than any sort of out of the box LLM with the way that we do it with some RAG, but it's still not where we want it.
That's good to know, and cool features also as well. And I believe in the necessity, especially because especially the example you gave about the mushroom forging and other, we need someone, and honestly we need to rely on AI to do this, because we will not be able to go over all the content that is spread all around the internet now. And there is also some other aspect, John, and I'm not sure how this will be tackled. Now, we're using the AI tools, ChatGPT and others, for now quite some time, as we were saying. And we know that usually they train their data based on what they find on the internet. So, and to the term that majority of my guests used, like junk in, junk out. So do you think we're gonna have like more junk, coming out because of what happened during all this couple of months that we've been using now, ChatGPT and other tools?
Yeah, it's kind of it's for the rest of humanity, the only like really known, trusted human created data sets have already been created. It's impossible to find a piece of content online and say with certainty, was this AI generated or human generated? So it's a pretty sort of incredible thing to think about, that for the rest of humanity, the largest known human English language created data sets have already been created. And that leads to, what will models train on in the future? Will it be synthetic data? Will it be, the garbage in, garbage out, the snake that eats its own tail analogy? Will synthetic data eating its own tail lead to model collapse? I don't think so, is as what I would say, in that I think that is a known problem. And there are some strategies at some of these sort of foundational model companies to address that concern. I think there's plenty of examples of, if that concern isn't addressed, where the output of these LLMs continues to trend towards the middle. So we looked at, we ran another study where we looked at the sentiment on a bunch of human written created pieces of content, and then scored those from sort of highly negative to highly positive, asked ChatGPT and some other models to rewrite them, and what we're trying to look at was saying which foundational model is sort of tends towards positivity, which tends towards negativity. They all just converged in the middle, just sort of vanilla content without a significant bias towards positivity or negativity. And so I think if we do run the risk around model collapse or snake eating its own tail, if it keeps getting trained on its own output, that will just end up with a whole bunch of sort of average content across the board always.
We're gonna see what the future is hiding to us in that domain. Just out of maybe a little bit the sense of humor, because you said like about English, so maybe humans will need to invent new language that's still like these AI models they cannot understand, and then you can judge if it is it's AI generated or not. Like I speak multiple languages, and I can say, for example, when I tried it with something other than English, it's still very obvious that it's like you don't need something else. But when it comes to English, yeah, like for me, even sometime after I use it, I say it doesn't look really like. I was just giving an example, and of course, I believe like with time when you start, and this is something ChatGPT they do. So they start the way, OpenAI through ChatGPT, they understand your interaction with the tool, and then with time, of course, they are training the model on your own data as well. So it start to understand more. It start to have the tone that usually I provided, which is for me it's not a problem. But yeah, like if someone takes this and maybe he or she quoted me, I would not know that. Really? Did I say this? Like this is really a challenge, I would say. So what do you think, John? The vision for the future for the internet to maintain its integrity and transparency with all the things that are going on? So will it be like a collaborative effort? Do you think that we need to put some regulations? People usually, they are going against regulations because they say regulation might also stop some other useful use cases of ChatGPT and these other AI tools. So what do you think the future of the internet would be to maintain it in with the integrity and transparency, as I was asking?
Yeah, so I think regulations may come in the form of other forms of media than text. I think societal harm associated with written word is not insignificant, but is not the same as images or video. And so I think this lines up with sort of the direction from like the White House letter with a bunch of OpenAI, with a bunch of AI companies, that I think there will be watermarking attempts or some regulation around attempting to understand if images, video, potentially audio was generated. I don't think text is going to fall into that camp because, one, I think it's harder to watermark than the others. And so I think, where's the internet going to end up? I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but I think there's going to be a lot more responsibility and trust put on who the author is behind a piece of content, whether it be a podcast, a video, written text. I think that's going to ultimately be the only path kind of through this that maintains integrity, where you know the author and then there's some amount of sort of proof that was the author. The author is who they said they were. I think that's ultimately what's going to where the internet's going to land on how it manages to continue to be trusted in a world where there's AI and human content that's so easily created.
Interesting times ahead. For me, another concern, to be honest with you, Jon, is besides also the content, and I mean, of course, the harm that the content can claim, is that someone who, and with all due respect, of course, who's not from a domain, all of a sudden they can come out and say, hey, see, I have a book, I have this much of reviews about this, and then they become an authority, and maybe they will not use AI in the future, but AI allowed them to claim something which is not true. Like, for me, it's a concern because, and actually, of course, there are some other factors, and this is why, at some stage when you were talking about the reviews and all this, so we have some other factors which people they don't think about much. What social media, and mainly, and again, no offense to anyone, I use them to promote sometimes, some reels and, and some short videos. But, all what happened on Instagram and TikTok and, these social media platforms allowed people to think, hey, I can, get hundreds of thousands of followers if I just claim, hey, I'm an author, right? I have the bestseller on Amazon or whatever. I have hundreds of reviews, and see what I can do. And then they will gonna continue, doing what they do usually there. So for me, this is a big concern, in addition to the other concerns that you brought up, Jon. So just, as my thought on this topic. Now, as we close to an end, Jon, final thoughts from you, any final things you want to leave us with today for the audience, and where people can find more about you and about Originality.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed the talk. I think there's a lot of interest and it's so new that there's a lot of sort of potential misunderstanding in the space around AI content creation, AI detection. So we've tried to make a really in-depth guide around understanding efficacy and where it's effective. So if sort of anyone's interested in understanding more about AI detection, we've got a post called Originality.AI, and it's at AI detection accuracy. And you can find it online, but that sort of dives deep into nerding out about sort of the limitations of when these tools are useful and not useful. But no, find me online. Jon at Originality.AI is my email. Happy to talk to anyone.
Great. Thank you very much, Jon. And I really appreciate the time today. And, it's an important topic, indeed an important topic, because it has a social impact. Maybe people, they don't think about it. And thank you for coming today and sharing, these insights with us, especially the research that you and your team you have done, and the consequences that can affect on our life. So again, thank you for the time. And this is for the audience. If you just discovered this podcast by luck, thank you for passing by. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did so, please don't forget to subscribe. We are available on all the podcasting platforms, and we are available on YouTube also as well. So please subscribe, share the podcast with your friends and colleagues. And if you are one of the loyal followers that keep coming and keep sending me their messages and recommendations, thank you for doing this. Keep doing that. Thank you very much. And if you are interested to be on the show, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If you have an important topic, such as the one that we discussed today with Jon, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'm always keen to listen to new ideas, new thoughts, new opinions about trending topics in tech and entrepreneurship and startups as usual. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I would love to talk to you. Thank you very much for tuning in today, and we will be again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.